Ensuring living wages, advancing decent work globally. Welcome to our next plenary session on the main stage. The United Nations Global Compact encourages companies to not only promote a living wage, but pay a living wage so that workers, families, and communities can live in dignity. Sharan Burrow, the Secretary General of the ITUC, will be with us in a moment to moderate this plenary panel. But first, let's stop off in Bangladesh.
My name is Kalpona Akter. I'm the Executive Director at Bangladesh Center for Worker Solidarity and President at Bangladesh Garment and Industrial Workers Federation. Today I'm speaking from Dhaka, Bangladesh. We are in a living wage conversation in these years. I wish this conversation would start long before. In fact, it was needed to start long before. If there would be a living wage, then people would not end them with the poverty wages. In modern slavery, or there would be no child worker working the hazardous jobs. I worked in the garment factory. I started working as a child. My mom had to send me to the factory because she did not get paid living wage at her work. She had to choose, rather sending us to school, sending us to the work. Me started at age of 12 and my brother at age of 10. And again, it was hazardous jobs and we ended up with the poverty wages. The living wage can prevent modern slavery. This can prevent precarious work. This can prevent child work around the world, especially in the production countries. If living wage would be ensured, there would not be unsafe migration around the world. People are migrating themselves with a bigger dream because they feel migrating them can ensure a better life because they will get more money. They can earn a better wages. If their countries where they're from, that could ensure a living wage for them in their work, they would be not choosing this unsafe migration. So we are discussing now, or we are talking to how we can bring a better supply chain, or how we can stop modern slavery, how we can stop precarious work. If we wanted to do that, we just not to discuss on the living wage. We need to start thinking a framework, an action needed to get a living wage law and make sure that it's enforced. To ending up precarious work, modern slavery, child labor, to have a decent work and decent supply chain, the living wage is really essential. So ensure living wage now. Thank you.
Thank you, Kalpona. Kalpona is an incredible warrior for justice in the supply chains of Bangladesh. She's just tremendous to work with, and I've been there alongside of her. We've also, of course, stood alongside each other in global forums. So thank you, Kalpona, and thank you, Femi. I'm Sharan Burrow. I'm the General Secretary of the International Trade Union Confederation, and I'm delighted to be with you on this vital topic of improving living wages. I wanted to actually say three major points. Low wages are, of course, devastating for workers. That goes without saying. You can't live on poverty wages. But they're also bad for business and the economy because low wages depress aggregate demand. They lead to low productivity and they indeed therefore generate low economic growth. Using low wages as a strategy for attracting FDI or foreign direct investment is not leading to higher human and economic development. It's keeping countries poor. Living wages need to be evidence-based. We urge companies to work with workers and their unions and developed with the full involvement of those workers and their unions at the table, designing the system, negotiating the outcome, making sure that workers know that their rights are being respected. We cannot, however, forget the importance of adequate regulation because there are many systems of living wages. But in the absence of regulation, it's really important to work with companies to make sure that we all promote, not just in practice a living wage, but also in regulatory practice, a framework that takes the competition between companies out of the equation. So the Global Compact, which I'm proud to say I'm a board member of with our first speaker, who will be Jean-Pascal Turquois. I think Jean-Pascal is with us. But the Global Compact is taking the lead. Their report on improving wages for decent work in supply chains is really worth reading. But just last week, they issued a press release encouraging companies to take action for decent work, to improve living wages, evidence-based. And Jean-Pascal, I'm delighted because you are a board member of the Global Compact, but also I've worked with you in other business settings. And I know that as the CEO of Schneider Electric, you are leading on these questions. So I'm going to introduce you, Jean-Pascal, to give us a kickoff, brief keynote to actually set the scene. Take it away.
Hey, Sharon, good to see you again. And well, I would hope it wouldn't be in video, but we have to live with the present conditions. We are tackling this morning a very important subject. I think it's a duty of all of us in the world to fight against poverty. And clearly, companies have a very clear role to play. At Schneider, we are a very large industrial company. And let me be practical. I'm going to speak about the case of my company and try to make it a bit more general. But we are a large industrial company. We have 200 plants, 400 distribution centers. We think that, of course, decent living is absolutely essential to the communities where we live, but also to the performance of our company. It makes business sense. Take our case. We deliver high quality, high safety products, significant level of customization. We need to deliver in a reliable and fast manner. We need to deliver life cycle services, low carbon footprint for our products. And of course, cost competitiveness is important, but it comes second to everything I said before. And to deliver all of that, we need a healthy, competent, educated, and loyal workforce. And essential to that, of course, is to be mobilized for decent work and decent living wage. And I totally acknowledge that this is not always the case. That consideration is not general in the industry, but I consider personally that no company, while companies live in symbiosis together with the communities around them, a company cannot thrive in a poor community as well. A community cannot thrive if you don't have healthy companies around. So improving wage for the lowest paid workers in the supply chain has long been clear to us as a pressing challenge for all responsible businesses to tackle. Now, 3 points I would like to highlight. The first one, you spoke about it. The UN Global Compact has been a fantastic federation of companies to work on difficult subjects. In other panels, we saw climate change, and actually, though we are all late, we are all progressing. But in the field of decent living on decent wages, it's also a teamwork. So UN Global Compact set the standards and informs and networks companies who work seriously on the subject. So what we've seen, and you mentioned it, there were articles, but the SDG 8 is very clear. So development goal number 8 is very clear on decent work, on economic growth. The UNGC recently launched a report on improving wages to advance decent work in supply chain. And this report is important because it puts in evidence lessons that we learn on the best practices for companies. The second point, our experience is that going through this major and essential improvement needs a process. You spoke about the necessary and continuous dialogue with the unions and the workers. What we've seen also is that salaries are defined in a very different manner, country by country and place by place. So you need first to make sure that we include in the definition of a decent wage everything that the family needs to develop decently: food, housing, sanitation, education, which is a way up for the whole family, healthcare, plus all the necessity of discretionary income for people to satisfy their needs. At Schneider, when we decided really to document that and base it on data, we recruited an independent provider so that it wouldn't be just us, but we work with a company to do it. And we launched that in 2018, and at the end of 2019, in the 60 plus countries where we operate, we had, together with the unions, defined what we were meaning by living wages. Finally, what is really important, it's not about your own company, it's about your whole ecosystem. And as much as the carbon footprint is mostly very often, at least for us, with your suppliers, that work on decent living has to be extended to the extended ecosystem of Schneider. So we've been, in our case, working with what we call our strategic suppliers, those who do 80% of our supply chain to start with, and make sure that what we were applying in our company would be also taking place with our suppliers. And that is on a very, very global scale. So by end of 2025, we want to make sure, on this being audited, that 100% of our strategic suppliers will provide decent work and decent wages to their employees. So in a nutshell, UNGC is giving a great framework for all to work together on this subject, and it's giving the tools also to make it. And at the end of the day, it needs a global mobilization of our own company, but the people we work with every day.
Thank you, John Pascal. Fantastic leadership there. You can see more than 60 countries, ambitions for not just direct employees, but through their strategic supply chains. That's the leadership we need. And of course, I can attest to the fact that people then become very loyal about companies like Schneider Electric. But we have two other leaders with us, and indeed equally Unilever with Mark Engel, who is indeed the Chief Supply Chain Officer of Unilever. You have been a fantastic advocate for decent work through supply chains. And Alexandra Polt, who is the Executive Vice President and Chief Sustainability Officer of L'Oreal. Again, amazing leadership in a fascinating supply chain. So I'm keen to listen to you. So let me start with you, Mark, and ask you, what's the business case for companies to actually commit to promote living wages? We know what your company shares as a value base with Unilever, but what's the business case?
Yeah, well, thanks, Sharon, and thank you for having us. First of all, I'm really excited about UN Global Compact's call to encouraging all companies today to promote and to provide living wages to all of their workers, because it is extremely important for SDG number 1, no poverty is an obvious one, but also SDG number 8, which is around decent work and economic growth. And if you look at the world right now, and the two biggest collective challenges that the world is facing today being climate change and social inequality, it's also important to realize that you will not fix one without tackle them both at the same time, because they are inextricably linked to each other. They're essentially two sides of the same coin. So, Unilever in January 2021, we have indeed made a commitment that by 2030, we will provide a living wage or a living income to everybody in our value chain that provides goods and services. We did that very deliberately in the COVID period, because it's in the first time since 20 years, poverty numbers have been coming down, but actually in COVID, they've been going up. So that is basically the reason why we're doing it. Now, I'm very often asked, well, what does all of this cost and what is the business case? And I always say the first thing that you have to ask yourself is, what is the business case and cost of not doing it? Can you really look yourself in the mirror and afford to run a company in 2021 with its values and reputations and brands, knowing that there's poverty in your value chain? Think about the cost of losing your license to operate. Think about the cost of your losing your brand reputation, losing your consumers, losing your customers, stakeholders. It will be far greater than the cost of paying a living wage. And then, of course, the human cost of not doing it, keeping people in poverty, and in some cases when children cannot be sent to school. It's important to remember that living wage is a floor and not a ceiling. And when you raise that floor, good things happen, more people out of poverty. But we also need to realize that when somebody earns $6 a day, and so all of a sudden it goes to $7 a day, that additional dollar of income at the bottom of the pyramid has much more spending impact in the day-to-day economy than when Sharon, you or I get $1 extra of salary, and it probably ends up in a bank. So consumers today, particularly millennials, Generation Z, are deeply interested about the conduct of companies and brands that they're buying. If they don't like what they see, they don't buy you. It's already visible for us that our brands that are with a strong societal and environmental and planetary purpose grow much faster than the rest of the business. So there's your clear business case. More consumption through better livelihoods and better brand growth with millennials and Generation Z, who will have the most buying power in 5 to 10 years.
Indeed, Mark, and the truth is that if workers at that level of wage deployment actually have more money, they spend it. They spend it in your companies and other businesses, and the circle of growth actually is promoted. So thank you very much. Don't go away. We've got time. We'll come back to you. But Alexandra, let me introduce you again as the Executive Vice President and Chief Sustainability Officer of L'Oreal. And I wanted to actually ask you the question of, how did you, why did you actually make this decision? And I've heard you talk about how companies need to collaborate. So why is that if we're going to get this job done?
Yes, Tamal, thank you very much for inviting us, and thank you for your question. So I think what is very clear, and I think we have to be aware of that, is that the system as it is today is running out of steam. We live in a society where 2/3 of people think that this is not working for them. So we have to make it work for them. We have to make economy work for them. It is very clear that poverty has a female face also. So we are very aware that within our value chain, the poorest workers are very often women, and you know how committed we are to women's rights and their empowerment. So I think additionally to what Mr. Tricoire and my colleague from Unilever said, there is a question of license to operate for companies in the future on a larger scale, not just in certain communities, but if we want to be competitive companies, we live in peaceful societies, and to do so, the system has to work for more people, and more people have to think that it works for them. And so I think we have to become collectively aware of that if it's not working for them, it's not working for us on the long term. And so I think that is part of, for us, what is very important is that we could already in 2020 do the work on our own employees by ensuring that all 85,000 people are paid a living wage. But we want to take it a step further, and the step further is our supply chain. And to do it in our supply chain, so this is one of our commitments for the future for 2030, is to say all our strategic suppliers will also pay a living wage to their employees. And that is essential, and that, of course, is only achievable if we are capable of cooperating with other companies and on a large scale, because this will ask for huge and significant transformations of business models of our suppliers. It will question their way of doing. It will lead to very important decisions for them. And so we need all companies and all our colleagues from other companies to be with us on that, because huge transformation like this, nobody wants to be alone facing that. Neither climate change, nor biodiversity loss, nor completely transforming, of course, the practices in supply chain. So we have to be together on that.
Thank you. Wow. So what incredible leadership is that when you see 3 global leaders who are actually saying we must get this done for the dignity of work to realise indeed SDG 8, but we also need to do it, if you take Alexandra's words, to create the stability that actually will provide for peaceful and stable societies, because we all know the world is fractured and business does need to operate in countries where there are democratic rights and freedoms and stable economies. I want to ask each of you, starting with you, Jean-Pascal, the Global Compact's taken a big leadership on this question, but it's actually been assisted by leaders like we have here today from the business community. What more can the Global Compact do now? They're pushing the barriers, they're encouraging companies to be part of this move, but what can they do now to really deepen this approach, to build the kind of collaborative environment across companies that you just heard Mark and Alexandra talk about?
Okay, I believe that the Global Compact can really help companies to define together the standards of living or decent wages to start with, and to accelerate the formation of those ecosystems which initiate a virtuous circle. Because again, if I look at my company, I cannot progress with all the companies without all the companies working with us. So it needs a common mobilization, it needs a common understanding. It seems simple, but if you don't have the frame to converge efforts, it's actually very difficult. So already the great thing of the UN Global Compact in this space has been to create that coalition of people, of companies working together to the same objective. But I was describing the process before, it's not simple. If all the people belonging to the local Global Compact organization work together, it really accelerates the pace. And Sharan, I think the COVID-19 has been a big wake-up call because in the places that were poorer, fighting the disease was much more difficult. And you know what? It disturbed the whole supply chain to a very large extent. So you can never dissociate the level or the health of your ecosystem together with from the future or the performance of the company. I think if somebody needs to be convinced, just look back at the past 12 or 18 months. We've learned that we needed people to be in good health to get a decent living if we want to keep our company developing.
Exactly. So, Alexandra, let me go to you, and Mark can bring up the conclusion. But you set off on this journey as a company, and we all know it's not easy. It sounds easy, but it's not easy. So what do you think that the Global Compact could do to actually assist companies to get to the, not just the commitment, but to get to the implementation standards that you've found your way towards?
Well, I would like to build on what Mr. Turquart just said. Actually, I think what is going to come, and most scientists say that, well, that was a small crisis, you know, and what is going to come is going to be much tougher. And so we need to be prepared for that. And if we want to be prepared for that, the two words are accelerations and ambition. So we cannot all the time negotiate to the lowest level of consent. We do not have the time to say, well, we will do it next year and next year. So acceleration for me, where the global compact has could also have a positive contribution, is the awareness that acceleration is going to be essential. We need to lead this transformation in our own interest, in the world's interest, in our stakeholders' interest, in our own interest. And so the one thing we do not have is time. And I think that is something that there are a lot of awareness in society. I also completely agree on that we had a tipping point with COVID. We are not going to go back. Perhaps people will go through an euphoria for some weeks, but everybody is aware now of what a systemic crisis leads to and how that looks like. And the next one is going to be worse. And so I think acceleration and raising the level of ambition.
Okay, I couldn't indeed put a pitch that would motivate people better than that. Let's build the resilience against the next crisis. Because we've had a shock, let's prepare for the next one by building resilient economies. Mark, you have the last word. But indeed, you know, we were talking about mandated due diligence earlier, and we were talking about how the peer learning that's so essential, the dialogue with workers and their unions that's so essential. What can the Global Compact do to really deepen that capacity for companies to feel confident through a peer learning approach?
Yeah, look, I think you said it there, Sharan, and I also think Jean-Pascal and Alexandra called it out as well. And I think the biggest fear of companies is what is the cost of all of this? Can I manage this? Can I afford all of that? And I think where the Global Compact can help is to create a level playing field, because by showing that it's not a blank check. Yes, the gap between minimum wage and living wage is 1 to 2 in the world. So there is a big gap to be covered. But there's also a 10-year journey. There's productivity, there's agricultural yield improvements, there are raising minimum wages by governments, there is government advocacy, there are sector initiatives. And so I think that it's very hard for individual companies to organize themselves. And I think the Global Compact can play a huge role to basically give companies the confidence to do it, that you have time to do it, that you're not signing a blank check, create a level playing field, and build that capability jointly. Because remember, when you are a company with long supply chains like Unilever is, there is an awful lot of amount of reach out that you need to do on tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 suppliers. Let's say the manageability of all of that will be much easier if you do that together with a group of companies through the chain, retailers, producers, suppliers. And I think the Global Compact has made a great call out today by calling on companies to do this. And I think they can play a role to basically bring us all together, which gives us the best chance of getting this done.
Thank you, Mark. And thank you all. I can assure you, as someone who's walked the supply chains in agriculture, in manufacturing, it is a few cents on a product in the global labour market. So thank you all for your leadership. Let's get the Global Compact right out there in front with building the movement that actually improves living wages, creates a floor of decent work, and helps us realise Goal 8. Thank you all.
Almost 30 years ago, I bought a handcrafted ornament on a market in Malawi, and as was the custom there, I negotiated about the price. That negotiation has always haunted me as I kept the ornament in my house. Nowadays, I have the terminology for this gut feeling. This crafts worker was not earning what is called a living income. This problem affects millions of people across the world. Therefore, the Netherlands has made living wage and income a central part of our efforts to reach SDG 8 and to contribute to reduce poverty and inequality. So what can governments do on the topic of living wage and income? Governments can create an enabling environment for earning a living wage and income by setting the right conditions and policies. In production countries, governments should strengthen regulations and policies on labour conditions, in particular minimum wages. Minimum wages should be set at a level that takes into consideration the needs of workers and their families. With our support, the ILO will deliver a methodology this year how governments can do so. In a pilot country, India, this has led to better inclusion of the needs of workers in the new minimum wage standard. In consumption countries, governments should adopt a smart mix of regulations and policies that foster responsible business conduct. For the Netherlands, a general due diligence obligation is a key element of such a smart mix, which should ideally be implemented at EU level. We look forward to the European Commission's proposal on mandatory due diligence expected the second half of 2021. If the EU does not arrive at an effective and workable proposal, the Netherlands is prepared to implement national mandatory measures. Examining risks to inadequate wages is part of how companies implement their due diligence, and if they identify these risks in their supply chains, they should put efforts into closing the wage gap step by step. The Netherlands supports business in various ways, for example through sector-wide cooperation among businesses with our sectoral responsible business conduct agreements, and through implementing organizations like the Sustainable Trade Initiative, IDH, who have created a call to action on living wages for business. The companies in this panel today have joined IDH's call to action, and I commend them for taking the lead. I also commend the UN Global Compact for their work on living wage and income. Especially in countries with lower minimum wages than a living wage, companies must ensure the actual implementation. We know closing the living wage gap is not an easy task, as it will include adjusting sourcing practices and paying higher prices to producers. But we have to raise the bar together. You can count on the Netherlands as your partner to do so. Thank you.